Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. We'll do the 17th episode of the summary of the Quran tonight. And we are beginning the next group of surahs, which is the fourth group, which comprises of 9 surahs, 8 of which are Meccan and 1 Surah Ahzab is a Madanan surah. The subject matter of this particular group is the affirmation of the prophethood. The Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, is indeed God's prophet. That particular point is emphasized and talked about more prominently in this particular group, although the other subjects like the warning given to the disbelievers and the good news to the believers is also there. And likewise, we do also find the emphasis on purification and cleansing and spiritual and moral elevation, excellence of believers also emphasized. We've seen it before that the Quran has divided its surahs, arranged them in a way that they are in 7 different surah groups. And when you read a particular surah, you would do well to place it in one phase or another of the prophetic mission, which was primarily comprised of 6 phases: warning, inzar, general universal warning, inzar-e-am. Then the evidence was established beyond doubt, which was itmam-e-hujjah. And then there was this declaration of disassociation with disbelievers and migration, which was hijrah, and people were informed that there's nothing that believers have to do with them. Then in the Madanan phase, we have the purification and spiritual moral excellence phase, which is tazkiyah and tathir, and finally the punishment phase. So this pair that we are going to talk of, which is Al-Furqan and Ash-Shu'ara, the first 2 surahs of this group, they are talking about the same subjects that we have seen, and in their case it's primarily the warning, universal warning, that we'll find more particularly emphasized. We start with Surah Al-Furqan first. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Tabarakallazi nazzala al-furqana ala abdihi. Blessed is he, that is God, who sent down Al-Furqan, the criterion, ala abdihi, upon his servant, liyakuna lil alamina nazira, so that he may be a warner for the mankind. So the Almighty arranged, alhamdulillah, arranged for the Quran, which the Quran mentions is Al-Furqan, the criterion between right and wrong, good and evil. And this has been revealed by the Almighty so as to enable the Messenger of God to warn people, all humans. Obviously, the way the Almighty has arranged for this requirement to be met is that the Messenger delivered the message to his companions, and the companions delivered it to the next generation, and that's how the process continues. And whoever has the knowledge of this book and the willingness, inclination, would let others know about it. The Quran warns the disbelievers of dire consequences that they're going to face on the day of judgment. And it says, disbelievers would regret on that day, فَيَوْمَ يَعَزُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا. Imagine the day when the wrongdoer will bite on his hands in regret and will say, I wish I had followed the path with the messenger. I wish I had not taken so and so as my intimate friend. He led me astray after it had become clear to me. And the messenger would plead to the Almighty, my Lord, inna qawmi ittakhadhu hadha al-Qur'ana mahjura. My people abandoned this Quran. This is all going to happen on the day of judgment. So the Almighty is asking the Prophet, فَلَا تُطِعِ الْكَافِرِينَ. Don't pay heed to what the disbelievers are saying. وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. And you strive with them, struggle with them, along with this Quran, in a way that your struggle becomes a big, prominent struggle. That is, do it prominently, do it in a way that you are striving as best as is possible for you. But you're doing it with the Quran. So obviously jihad here means striving to let people know what the truth is, inviting them to the message of the Quran, responding to their questions, trying as best as possible to convince them. Then later in this surah, the Almighty is talking about the attributes of the good believers. And he mentions from verse 63 to 76 towards the end of the surah, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ حَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And the true servants of the most merciful God are those who walk on earth humbly. Hauna. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ. And when uncultured people speak to them harshly, instead of reacting similarly, قَالُوا سَلَامًا, they say salam. We mean peace. We don't want to get involved in this kind of absurd, frivolous discussion which is initiated for nothing good. Those who spend part of their night prostrating and standing in prayer, praying to their Lord, those who pray, avert, O God, from us the punishment of hell. Its punishment is indeed dreadful. It's most certainly an awful place and a station and an evil station to live. Those who, when they spend, they are neither wasteful nor stingy, but maintain a moderate path between the two. So, the attributes which the Almighty would want believers to follow are being mentioned. The passage goes on to clarify, and I'll just paraphrase what the Almighty has mentioned, that such people neither ascribe partners with God, nor kill anyone, nor indulge in extramarital relationships. They don't give false evidence, and whenever they pass by evil speech, they just ignore it with dignity. When they are reminded through God's message, they listen to it attentively, seriously. And instead of falling upon it blindly, they pray that their spouses and their children, progeny, follow the right path too, giving them comfort of eyes by doing so. Such people, the Almighty declares, are going to get a rousing reception and will be rewarded with high mansions in the paradise for being steadfast in the right path. So, the important thing is that these people, good people, were bima sabaru. They'll be rewarded because of the steadfastness that they showed. They remain resolute, they continued to do the good things, were not deterred by the difficult circumstances and challenges that they confronted. Then we move on to Surah Ash-Shu'ara, which is the 26th surah, and it's one of the 3 surahs, the longer surahs, wherein we have the detailed mention of the stories of the 6 prominent messengers of God, whose stories are pretty much similar, that they delivered the message of the Almighty to their respective nations. And toward the end of each of these stories, we find that the disbelievers, they were punished by the Almighty, they were taken to task and they were annihilated. This surah also has a feature which it shares with some other surahs like Al-Mursalat, Al-Qamar and Ar-Rahman, wherein it has verses which are repeated, which are called tarji'i ayat, verses that are repeated for the message of those verses to be emphasized upon people who were not paying heed. So their attention is drawn over and over again. The verses that are repeated in this surah are Inna fi zalika la-aya. After the mention of each story, the Almighty says, indeed in it there is a sign. وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُمْ مُؤْمِنِينَ. But most of them are not going to believe. وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. And your Lord is mighty and He's forgiving, He is merciful. So, if those people who are denying and rejecting the message would continue doing it, God is mighty, He's strong. And if there are people who would want to repent and correct their ways, mend their ways, the Almighty is forgiving, merciful. Verses 77 to 82 of this surah are talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam. Quite apart from the other 6 messengers that I referred to, Nuh, Hud, Saleh, Lut, Shuaib, Musa alayhi salam. These 6 messengers are mentioned in the Quran very often in the same passages. But here, the 7th prominent messenger, Ibrahim alayhi salam, is also mentioned. And the Quran clarifies in verse 70 of Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9, that he too was a messenger like other messengers, and in his case too, his nation whom he addressed directly were punished by the Almighty, although that punishment is not quite as often mentioned in the Quran as is the mention of the other nations' punishment we see in the Quran. While talking about the false gods, Ibrahim alayhi salam said, فَإِنَّهُمْ عَدُوٌّ لِّي إِلَّا رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. They are all my enemies except God, the Lord of the entire humanity. And he goes on to say, who created me and who guides me. And he gives me food to eat and water to drink. الَّذِي يُطْعِمُنِي وَيَسْقِينَ. And when I fall ill, وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ. He cures me. Who will cause me to die and then bring me to life, back to life. And who I aspire that He will forgive my sins on the day of judgment. So, this was the effective, beautiful message delivered by Ibrahim alayhi salam, and likewise was done by all other messengers. Then we move on to verse 192 onwards, wherein the Almighty is mentioning, وَإِنَّهُ لَتَنزِيلُ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That after learning about these stories, because the Almighty is saying that be sure that these disbelievers are no different from the disbelievers that we have talked about in the previous verses. So that message is delivered by the Almighty, and He says that, have no doubt that this book has been وَإِنَّهُ لَتَنزِيلُ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, revealed with meticulous arrangements upon your heart, O Prophet, that you may be of a warner for them. That is, you have been asked to warn them, and it's in a clear Arabic language. The idea is that through this book, you are able to warn all those people who are prepared to pay heed to warning. And then it goes on to say in verses 214 and 215, وَأَنزِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and warn your closest relatives. That is, this message is meant for the entire mankind, but it has to be delivered in a certain logical sequence. And those who are the most deserving of receiving the message are the ones who are the closest to you. So that responsibility is there for everyone who wants to deliver the message to discharge in that sequence. And then it goes on to say, and lower your wings of mercy and concern on those who have followed you among believers. So on the one hand, the disbelievers have to be warned against the dire consequences that they are likely to face if they're going to reject the message. Those who have already accepted the message are the ones who deserve the sympathy, concern and attention of the messenger. Then we move on to verses 221 to 226, wherein we find that the Almighty is responding to the allegations, accusations of the disbelievers that this message, God forbid, was from Satan. The other allegation was that it was poetry, nothing serious, nothing important. God Almighty responds by saying, هل أنبئكم على من تنزل الشياطين? Shall I tell you upon whom Satan's descend? You are accusing it to have come from Satan. Shall I tell you who they come to? They descend on every sinful liar. They lend their ears, these liars, they lend their ears attentively to hear something from the unseen world. And most of them are cheats. So there were these soothsayers who would impress people with the way they would present their cases to them, their stories to them. Some people are experts in fooling others, and they are able to create an impression as if they know everything and they know the unseen world. But the Almighty is pointing out the fact that if you look at their character, you would find that they're liars, they're evil people. Their conduct, their personal lives, their behavior is pretty much clearly reflecting they're not the people who are to be followed. And he goes on to say, وَالشُّعَرَاءُ, and as for the poets, يَتَّبِعُهُمُ الْغَاوُونَ, only the misguided people follow them. Have you not noticed that they wander aimlessly in every valley, and they say what they don't do, except those who believe, practice righteousness, remember God unceasingly, and defend themselves whenever they are wronged. So, not all poets are bad, evil, but many of them, if not most, are. The exceptions are the ones who believe properly, they do good deeds, practice righteousness, and they keep remembering God over and over again, and if they are wronged, they defend themselves as best as is possible for them. Thereafter, we move on to Surah 27, which is Surah An-Naml. This surah, along with the next Surah Al-Qasas, they form a pair. Both surahs are surahs of Musa alayhi salam. His story is described. That's what binds the two together. And these surahs were also revealed in the period when there was this inzar-e-am, the warning to everyone was being delivered. And in the surah we find both warning to the disbelievers and good news to the believers. One very important passage that we find in Surah An-Naml, which is the 27th surah, and we'll do this surah today, and the next time, tomorrow, we'll do Surah Al-Qasas. And as I said, both surahs are partners, and both surahs, they begin with Tasin, although in Surah Al-Qasas we have Tasin Mim, an addition of Mim in it, which is something, as I keep saying, we might come to learn about later when research gets more clear and decisive in this matter, that these letters do have meanings, and their meanings are reflected in the passages that we find in these surahs, the basic message of the surahs. In Surah An-Naml, verse 13 and 14, verses 13 and 14, there is an important point that one notices, which is regarding the question of kafir. Who are the people who are disbelievers? And what we find is that the Almighty is telling us that when Musa alayhi salam, he went to Pharaoh and his company, his courtiers, he delivered the message. And this is what verse 13 says, فَلَمَّا جَاءَتْهُمْ آيَاتُنَا, when our verses, our signs reached them, those people, مُبْصِرَةً, these clear signs, convincing signs, قَالُوا هَذَا سِحْرٌ مُبِينٌ, they said that this is a clear magic. Obviously, somebody can make that statement if he or she is not convinced. And if that is the case, then you can dispute the statement, but you can't claim that the person is evil. But the Almighty is telling us that وَجَحَدُوا بِهَا, they rejected them. وَاسْتَيْقَنَتْهَا أَنفُسُهُمْ, even though their hearts were convinced that the message was true. This is what kufr, disbelief, is. That there are people who know that the message that is being delivered to them is from God, it makes sense, there is no doubt about it, and yet they are adamant, they are stubborn, they would not like to believe and accept. That's what Pharaoh and his followers did, and the Almighty says they did it zulman wa uluba, unjustly and arrogantly. That's what they did, and that's what their crime was. Fanzur kayfa aqibatul mufsidin, so see how was the end of the mischief mongers. So the Quran is pretty much clear that all people who have been described as kafirs are the ones who knew what the truth was and they rejected it knowingly and arrogantly. Therefore, it's something for Muslim believers to worry about, that if they are trying to accuse some people of being kafirs, uh, is it that they've actually received the message properly and they are knowingly rejecting it? Or is it that they don't even know what the truth is because the message has not been properly communicated to them? If it's the second case, then there is no way that we can accuse anybody of being a kafir. We can call them non-Muslims, but we can't call them kafirs. Likewise, we should also worry about the fact that within Muslims, being Muslims, while we know on the one hand that the message that we have is from God, if we are not taking it seriously and are behaving in a manner that is the behavior of somebody who rejects the message, then there is a great danger that instead of them, we may actually be categorized as kafirs, which is obviously something of a very serious concern that one must always be worried about. In verse 15, the Almighty is talking about the attitude of two great prophets, the father and the son, Dawood and Sulaiman alayhimus salam. It says, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ عِلْمًا. We conferred upon David and Solomon knowledge. We gave them real, true knowledge. وَقَالَ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي فَضَّلَنَا عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And they both said, all praise and all expressions of gratitude are for the one who bestowed upon us blessings and made us superior in worldly sense over a large number of people, believing people. So they were the ones who were the kings who were ruling over them. This is in particular, this mention is for the people of Quraysh who were arrogant because they were the rulers, because they were strong. And because of their strength, they thought that they don't need to believe in a message that was coming to them from a person who they thought was their subject, who was not quite as strong, as well connected as they were. So the Almighty is giving them the example of two kings who were mightier than them, and yet they were thankful, humble, and inclined towards the truth. In fact, they were the ones who were the bearers of truth. Then we move on to the story of the people who were living at the time of Saleh alayhi salam, people of Thamud. Verses 48 to 51, the Almighty says, وَكَانَ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ تِسْعَةُ رَهْطٍ. And there was in that city where Saleh alayhi salam had preached the message of God, 9 families. يُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. They were causing mischief on earth, وَلَا يُصْلِحُونَ, and they were not reforming it. So they were evil people, arrogant people, and they were the ones who were rejecting the message of God's messenger Saleh. They were rejecting it because they felt that if this message is going to get popular, then their strength, authority is going to be threatened. So they all decided, قَالُوا تَقَاسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ. Let's swear upon God, لَيُبَيِّتَنَّهُ, that we are all going to quietly kill him. ثُمَّ لَنَقُولَنَّ لِوَلِيِّهِ. And then we will say to the heirs of Saleh, مَا شَهِدْنَا مَهْلِكَ أَهْلِهِ. We did not witness the murder of his family. وَإِنَّا لَصَادِقُونَ. And we are truthful. What we are saying is right. That was the kind of plot that they devised against Saleh and his family. Quite the same way as the Quraysh were doing it against the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. after they failed to restrict and check the message from being getting popular, it was influencing the society. As a final measure, they decided that there's no other way out but to kill him. So the Almighty is mentioning the story of Saleh alayhi salam, that in his city there were 9 tribes, families, and they put together, they came up with this plan that they are going to get rid of him. So the Almighty mentions, وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا. They devised a scheme, وَمَكَرْنَا مَكْرًا. And God says, we also devised a scheme. وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. And they could not perceive it. God decided that the plot, the scheme that they were devising secretly, is going to be destroyed. And that's what many humans do not understand. That when they secretly get together to come up with a plan which is meant to destroy some people, an evil plan, if their intentions are not good, ultimately God is going to prevail, because He is the one who is controlling everything and is encompassing everyone. He knows what people are doing in the open or secretly. So these people who tried to design a plot to kill Saleh and his family, they were not successful. Instead, God's secret plan got implemented and they were punished. It was a secret plan because it came all of a sudden, and before their plan could get implemented, the Almighty eliminated these evil people. فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ مَكْرِهِمْ. See for yourself how was the end of their scheme. أَنَّا دَمَّرْنَاهُمْ وَقَوْمَهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. That we totally destroyed them and their nation, all of them. So these people of Quraysh would do well to understand that instead of planning secretly against the Prophet, they should pay heed to what he's saying and believe in him, or else their ultimate end is going to be similar to what happened to the people who opposed Saleh. Then we move on to verse 62, wherein the Almighty is actually, it's a series of verses which are very effectively and beautifully inviting the attention of those people who were ascribing partners with God. The Almighty is asking them, what do your gods do? Compare it with what God does. Your gods, for one thing, they don't exist. And even if they exist, in your opinion, are you sure that they do the same as what God has done? So one of the things that the Almighty is mentioned in verse 62 is that أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ فَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Are your gods better, or the one who listens to the prayer of the desperate individual, and then he relieves him from his suffering? That is, God Almighty is the one who is there to always listen to your prayers, provided you pray to Him properly. And the best and the most effective prayer is the prayer of the person who is doing it desperately. You have a need and you need it badly, and you're asking God for help, and God, you are relying and trusting most confidently. You know that He's the one who can do it, and you're confident that He's the one who is listening to you. God says, I will do it. I do it. And He's asking these polytheists that, do your gods also do the same? And if not, then are they better? Or is this real God of yours better? Then we move on to verses 80 and 81 of Surah An-Naml, wherein after having delivered this message most clearly and effectively, the Almighty is telling the Prophet, comforting him, telling him, Innaka la tusmi'ul mauta. O Prophet, you cannot make these dead people listen to what you're saying. These are people who are dead, morally and spiritually gone. You can't make them listen to what you're saying. Wala tusmi'u summa du'a. Nor can you make the person who is deaf listen to you. You can't. They would not listen to your call because their ears have been rendered incapable of listening to you because of their own wrongdoings. Iza wallau mudbirin. The deaf is not going to listen to you when they are turning away and withdrawing from you. Wama anta bihadil umyi an dalalatihim. Likewise, you can't guide the one who is blind from his misguidance. A person doesn't want to see. So despite having eyes, if a person is not using his eyes to see where the path is, then he is as good or as bad as a blind person. So Prophet, you can't guide the blind an dalalatihim from their misguidance. In tusmi'u illa man yu'minu bi ayatina fahum muslimun. O Prophet, you can only make a person listen to you who really wants to believe in our signs. And when we do it, he will become a submitting believer. So it all depends on the attitude of people. There are people who want to understand and therefore they are influenced by God's message. But there are others who don't want to understand. Why? Because of their arrogance, because of their obsessive overindulgence in worldly matters, in the immediate attractions and gratifications that they get from this worldly life, and they have no other purpose, no goal, higher goals in life. They've just made it a point that it's this life and its pleasures that they are seeking and nothing else. So they shut their eyes, they put fingers in their ears and they don't listen. So the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, is being comforted that you don't need to bother about them. And finally, in verses 91 and 92, the Almighty says, Innama umirtu an a'buda rabba hazihil balda. I have been asked, ordered, that I worship the Lord of this city, allazi harramaha, the city which He has made sacred, this city of Mecca. I am not going to worship the false gods which you, O people of Mecca, are worshipping. I have been asked, ordained, that I worship the Lord of this city, allazi harramaha, which He has made sacred. One attu al Quran, and that I should recite the Quran and present it to the people. Faman ihtada, so whoever wants to be guided, whoever is seeking guidance, فَإِنَّمَا يَهْتَدِي لِنَفْسِهِ, he is seeking guidance for his own good. He will get guided and it will benefit him alone. وَمَنْ ضَلَّ, and the one who goes astray, away from the right path, فَقُلْ, then you say to him, إِنَّمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُنْزِرِينَ, I am only one amongst those who are warning. I am one of the warners. My job is not to force you to believe. That's not my task. My job is to warn you and let you know of the serious, dire consequences of the incorrect, unacceptable behavior that you are showing. And it's your behavior, your attitude that is causing you not to understand this message from God. So my task, job is over when I deliver the Quran to you. That's exactly what believers, Muslims should also do. It's not our job to convince people and force them to Islam. Our job is only to help others know what God's message says. May the Almighty enable us to understand His message properly, and may He enable us to follow it as best as is possible.